So does Las Vegas have Georgia right with how many games they think the Dogs will win? I'm going to tell you. Stick with me here. Dean Legge from Dog Post, making you a smarter Georgia fan. Thanks for watching. Georgia is listed at 8.5. That's their over/under for wins. 8.5 in a 10-game season in the SEC. So let's just go through the schedule for the Dogs. You can see this and find this on Dog Post, dogpost.com, DAWGPOST.com. You should go there today. Right now will be great. They open with Arkansas, a game they definitely should win. They are 24-point favorite against the Hogs. That's one win for you. Then they come home, Georgia, and play Auburn on October 3rd. We don't know what time that game will be played. The only game we really have an indication as to when it will be played is the Florida game, which should be at 3:30 on CBS. But anyway, Dogs are going to host Auburn in a game that will be a test for both of them for sure. This is a game Georgia can lose. I don't expect that to happen. I would say that means 2 wins for Georgia. A week later, Tennessee rolls into town. This is a game that Georgia will probably be favored by 2 touchdowns or more. I would think that Georgia will win the game against Tennessee. And then the one game that looks most like a loss on Georgia's schedule, October 17th at Alabama. Game in Tuscaloosa. Obviously, like all the rest of these games, there's not a huge crowd for a lot of these games. I mean, none of them are going to be more than 25,000 people at most. So maybe you see 25,000 in Tuscaloosa. That's a game Georgia should lose on paper 3-1. So they got to get to 9 wins to be an over, and obviously 8 wins would be an under. Then they got to go to Kentucky. I think this is probably their trickiest game of the year. It's a sandwich game, if you want to call it that, between Alabama and the off week. Game at Kentucky. Now look, Kentucky has been pretty good lately. Last year, losing their quarterback in the middle of the season was not ideal. They pushed Florida to the limit. They played really well, generally speaking, with a situation on offense that was not that great. That's a Georgia win, but that's a tricky game. Better watch it. I'll give Georgia a win there. That's 4 wins. Then the game in Jacksonville. Georgia's going to be between a 3 and 6 point favorite to beat the Gators. They're the better team. I'll take them in that game. I talk about the Florida game plenty. I don't think y'all need to discuss it any further. You know, the other problem for the Gators too is they have had a lot of transition in the defensive front. That's a problem, and of course that wide receiver. So the Gators, I'm going to give Georgia that one. At Missouri, a first-year head coach for the Tigers. Once you get past the Florida game, things get a lot more manageable for the Dogs. That's definitely a win in Missouri. I just find it hard to believe Georgia loses that game. Come home a week later, just before Thanksgiving, the Saturday before Thanksgiving, an odd time to play this game. All these games are strange from here on out. The only one that's hitting its normal time is the game with Florida. Georgia hosts Mississippi State. Mike Leach and the Pirates from Starkville. That's a game Georgia should win. Mississippi State. After Dan Mullen, it looked they were okay in 2018. 2019, they decided to make a change. I don't know if that was because they thought they could go get Mike Leach or because he was available or what that was all about. But they made the change, and you got Mississippi State on Georgia's schedule, one of the 2 games that Georgia added in this offseason. And then 2 days after Thanksgiving, South Carolina. So this game wound up where it's at because Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, and Kentucky couldn't keep their traditional rivals because of the SEC's decision to play 10 games. Georgia gets Carolina and Columbia. That is definitely a game Georgia should win. Of course, the season ago it was the game they should have definitely won. We've seen with Kirby, the season after he loses to someone, they do pretty well the next year against them. Georgia Tech, Vanderbilt, I forgot who else they lost to in 16, Tennessee. Those were all blowouts the year later. So let's see what happens with Carolina and Georgia. That is definitely a game Georgia should win much later in the season than it's ever been and probably ever will be. I thought they could have ended the season with South Carolina, but it does make sense with what the SEC did. So that's another win. So that right there puts you at 8. So they're 8-1 going into their final game of the season. The over and under is 8.5. Can they beat Vanderbilt at home? Yes, they will kill Vanderbilt in Athens. I think right now, to me, 8.5 is probably right where it should be because the question is, do they lose to Auburn? Do they lose to Florida? It's hard to see other games that they could possibly lose. I think at Kentucky could be a touch tricky. Maybe Tennessee. I mean, I just don't buy that. But, in order, Alabama, Florida, then Auburn. So if you're betting this game betting this season over under for Georgia, you want to really look at those 3 games. Are they likely to win all 3 of those games? They're going to be anywhere from an 8 to 10 point favorite against Auburn at home. At home doesn't mean what it used to, that's for sure. But in this case, being at home gives you, I guess some comfortability, if that's even a word. The start of the season, it looks awful for Georgia. You're going to Arkansas, it's a road game, and it's almost as far as you can go in this conference, with the exception of Missouri, which comes up later. But you start the season with 3 of your first 4 games being against Auburn, Tennessee, Alabama. Those are brand names in this league. They're 3 of the top 6, schools that we traditionally think of in the league: Auburn, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, LSU. You got 3 of them in their first 4 games of the season. That's asking a lot. Now, with that said, if you beat Auburn, that means that you're getting ready for Alabama along the way the first 3 weeks. And we'll just have to see what happens with Bama as they move forward too. Okay, Alabama, they're going to be, right now they would be favored to win that game against Georgia for sure. And I'm not sure there's a situation where they play in Tuscaloosa and they would not be favored. But Alabama really, just like Georgia, has a big test in week 2. They host Texas A&M. Now, if Texas A&M is actually ever going to make a move, it's going to be in this season. We'll see, right? So Bama and Georgia, week 2. If they both get by that game, you're definitely, got a collision course for Georgia and Bama in week 4. What the SEC is calling week 4, it's like week 8 or 6 for college football. But that's what you do. Now, I do think that they get through this season with 9 wins minimum. They can beat Alabama and Tuscaloosa just the same way, the Gators can beat Georgia and Jacksonville. So that's the game to watch. If you win that one, you're playing with house money, because that probably means that you're in the playoff no matter what the rest of the way. I mean, that game is opportunity for Georgia more than it is anything else. Dean Legge from Dog Post, making you a smarter Georgia fan. I want you to take a look at this 2020 playlist. We are updating it. Check it out. It's where you want to be. We've got a lot of details about players as well as situations. We'll see you on that playlist.